Mysteries of History Revealed. Dinosaurs to Extraterrestrials by Jeremy Auldaney. Copyright 2014, all rights reserved. And we're starting on page 99 at the bottom. Evidence, and this is number 18 of this series. Evidence of two cataclysms in the Bible. The Bible says there was only one ocean and one continent. Just like the paleontologists and geologists tell us. What they call Pangea. Quote, Genesis 1:9. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. End quote. It's very interesting how the Bible and science parallel each other. And I don't mean the speculations of Darwinism or atheists who try to interject things into science. The facts of science always are supported by the Bible, and the Bible is supported by the science. And then during the flood, 1,656 years later, the earth was cracked open in faults, creating the fountains of the deep. There were no volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, or faults before this, and there were no high mountain ranges. Even secular scientists, paleontologists say the very same thing, that there were no high mountains during the Mesozoic. Genesis 10:25, quote, and unto Eber were born two sons. The name of one was Peleg. For in his days was the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. End quote. This describes continental drift, what scientists call continental drift. I remember I got this idea when I was about 13 or so, or 12, probably younger. When I read about it in National Geographic, I said, that's in the Bible. I remember even where I was. I was in Pasadena. This cataclysm occurred about 100 to several hundred years after the flood, during Peleg's lifetime, about the time of Babel. And this time the earth was divided, and lifespan dropped another 1/3, like it did right after the flood, showing another catastrophe happened at this time. Henry M. Morris says in the Genesis record, pages 247 and 249, quote, all of these evidences lead to the conclusion that if the continents did divide, this dividing could have occurred in relation to the division of the languages after the Tower of Babel, possibly sometime after the migrations caused by the confusion of languages. When people were sufficiently dispersed, God caused the continents to move apart. End quote. Continuing, many of the geological mysteries which are difficult to understand in relation to the flood could be explained by a second worldwide catastrophic event, such as would be caused by the sudden global shifting of the continents. Great earthquakes, volcanic activity, uplifts, and sinking of vast land areas and mountain forming would be expected to accompany such vast changes in the Earth's surface. He also divided the land so the dispersion would continue. End quote. Henry Morris. There are many creationists today that contradict Henry Morris. They don't believe in the cataclysm after the flood. And they make statements, oh, there couldn't be, that would be almost the equivalent of the flood. But I have found that they are wrong. Henry Morris is right. Continental drift and the dividing of the continents. I had read an article in National Geographic about continental drift when I was about 12, and it made me think of what the Bible said about this. Of course, it was more than the continents moving apart. It also involved the rise of the oceans covering land bridges and continental shelves, which was dry land before. And this was even after the flood, until his second cataclysm. Cretaceous period, this is a reference, Cretaceous period, zoomdinosaurs.com, Enchanted Learning, enchantedlearning.com, subjects, dinosaurs, Mesozoic, Cretaceous. There was no polar ice during the warm mild, warm, subtropical Cretaceous, or around sea level until the mid-Cretaceous, a time of high tectonic activity, continental, including California, Sierra Nevada, the Rocky Mountains in the western USA. Quote, the breakup of the supercontinent Pangaea into separate continents was underway. The separation of the Laurasia and Gondwanaland was complete. In the first half of the Cretaceous, temperatures were warm, seasonality was low, and global sea levels were high, no polar ice. At the end of the Cretaceous, there were several climate changes, lowered sea levels, and high volcanic activity, end quote. Sounds like they're describing what the Bible describes of the pre-flood world, right to a T. Their assumptions on sea level are based on speculation that when there is no ice sheet, there are high ocean levels. They do not consider that at this time, most of the water was inside the earth, and the oceans were lower. Evolutionists also misinterpret the strata, identifying Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous, etc., by the fossils they contain, assuming these index fossils lived millions of years apart. These same fossils can be explained as different phases of the catastrophic event during different tidal impacts from different sources and different directions, bearing animals from different environments. The Cambrian Ediacaran marine plants and animals, supposed oldest fossils, are made up of deep water organisms as the cataclysm began. Some are seen in deep oceans today. Then the fish in the oceans are Devonian, and then as the flood began to rise onto the land, it trapped swamp animals in the Carboniferous, which is Mississippi and Pennsylvania. In fact, when you go east from the Grand Canyon, you cross strata containing, generally speaking, Permian aquatic reptiles, Triassic riverside aquatic reptiles, then Jurassic dry land animals, and then Cretaceous highlands containing the surviving remnants of the continent-crossing tidal impacts as the flood rose during the first few months of the flood. The rest of the geologic column is post-flood cataclysms. Marine incursions during the flood. All through the Mesozoic, paleontologists and geologists tell us the ocean invaded the continent with huge river-like marine incursions, which came and went, burying land dinosaurs in low spots covering millions of square miles from Canada to Mexico. Reference. Bible Hub commentary says of Genesis 8:3, the water receded steadily from the earth. BibleHub.com, Genesis. Then the floodwater steadily receded, diminishing completely by the end of the flood, and the waters turned back and forth upon the earth, and after the end of the flood, and the waters returned off the earth, going and coming, just as described by paleontology. Quote, verse 3, and the waters returned from off the earth continually, literally going and returning, more and more, end quote. This is what would happen if the ocean rose to cover the continents in tidal impacts. They would go and come at the beginning of the flood, as well as when the water receded from the earth after the flood, caused by the daily tides, not counting the tsunami impacts resulting from asteroid impacts, landslides caused by earthquakes, and ocean floor explosive volcanic eruptions. Marine deposits on land are not seas, as described by the paleontologists or geologists. Fanning Suzette, Stratigraphy of the Sundance Formation, retrieved 2007, 206. Quote, the Sundance Sea was an eperitic, temporary continental shallow sea that existed in North America during the mid to late Jurassic period, end quote. Temporary, back and forth, over a short period of time, not millions of years. There were lots of these oceanic incursions during the Mesozoic. The fossils in these deposits do not indicate these were seas. They were formed by rapidly moving water mixed with volcanic ash. The Upper Cretaceous Lance Formation also shows volcanoes in Montana pelted this deposit in Wyoming. And the further you go north, the greater the amount of the volcanic lava bombs in the Hell Creek Formation, identical to strata as the Lance, containing billions of Cretaceous dinosaur bones. And in the limestone that formed Carlsbad Cavern shows this falsely called reef or coral was a tsunami deposit formed by a jumble of marine animals which were piled up by tidal impacts. They are not in situ. Living coral reefs are wider at the top than the bottom, like a V. These are mounds which are wider on the bottom. After the Mesozoic dinosaur strata is the post-flood Cenozoic after the KT boundary. These so-called periods of geologic history can be explained by depositional sorting, specific graphitic sorting, environmental sorting, and by sorting by moving water. Even evolutionists agree when it comes to marine versus terrestrial fossil deposits, there is a preservational bias. And they agree that many organisms existing at the same time are missing from the fossil assemblages. For example, Triceratops existed at the same time as bipedal carnivorous theropod dinosaurs, and their bones are found together. But when it comes to fossil tracks, Triceratops and other dinosaurs are rarely found, while theropod tracks are very common. Carnivorous theropod tracks are much more common than herbivorous dinosaur tracks, but we know there were much more plant-eating dinosaurs than meat-eating, because you need lots of herbivorous animals to feed the few carnivores. Also, there are very few juvenile tracks found. This is called a bias in the fossil record. Authors note, it is possible that the hungry carnivorous dinosaurs, under the catastrophic conditions, were eating humans and mammals and small dinosaurs days before the land was covered. The present is the key to the past. In fact, evolutionists like to claim that the fossil record goes from fish to amphibians to reptiles to mammals to man, and yet all of these exist today at the same time in different places. If the present is the key to the past, as Charles Lyell claimed, then all these most likely existed together when the geologic column was formed. The coelacanth fish became extinct in the late Cretaceous. They claimed the coelacanth was a lobe-finned fish, which evolved into amphibians because they used their thick fins to go from one pond to another across dry land. They had very thick fins. That's why they call them lobe-finned. They could be used like feet, but they were not feet. They were fins, only to move them over dry land. But it is still alive today as a fish, showing no indication it has evolved at all. However, they did change the name to give the illusion of evolution. They like to do that. When they find the same animal disappears in the fossil record, then reappears elsewhere, they give it a different name so that creationists won't realize it's the same fish. Tropical dinosaurs in the Arctic. Secular scientists have tried to explain the existence of tropical fossils in the Arctic from an evolutionary viewpoint by claiming continental drift caused some of today's Arctic areas to move through tropical regions during the Mesozoic. However, a museum scientist at California State University, Riverside, told me he went on an expedition to Spitsbergen Island in the Arctic and said they cannot understand how tropical dinosaurs and plants could be there because this island was in the Arctic when the dinosaurs were there. Creation scientists believe there were no high mountains before the flood because they formed during and after the flood catastrophe as a result of the cracks in the earth and movements of the continental plates. Due to the cracking of this catastrophic event, which was whacked by a large asteroid or asteroids. Secular scientists agree. A humanist, Dr. Edwin H. Colbert, retired curator of vertebrate paleontology at the American Museum of Natural History, in a book on dinosaurs, says he believes there were no high mountains during the Mesozoic when dinosaurs were on Earth. I visited him in Arizona after he retired. I believe he has passed away since. Orogeny, mountain building, had not formed the high mountains we see today. In fact, paleontology and geology shows us most mountain ranges formed during the periods of orogeny by continental plate impacts in recent times, and many after the flood. Secular scientists believe most of the orogeny, mountain building, occurred in specific periods of time and were not continuous upthrusting. Get that? That contradicts their theories right there. They give the impression that mountains are constantly rising slowly over millions of years, and yet they admit that they were formed during orogenous events in the fossiliferous strata, which means they were events over weeks, days, months, maybe. Mystery of missing human fossils and artifacts, as well as mammals. Large mammals are missing. That's a mystery. It's been a mystery to me for many years. Mystery of the missing humans. The biggest mystery of creation science is, where are the human fossils and their artifacts and the cities? There are billions of dinosaurs, shellfish, trilobites, logs, leaves, ferns, insects, mammals, but no human or large mammal remains from the flood period. All the human fossils and large mammals found by both creationists and evolutionists are post-flood. All of the humanoids, hominids, and ape fossils found by evolutionists could be placed on a single table. About 2/3 of the human artifacts found out of place are also post-flood. However, that same table could hold all the human artifacts and bones found out of evolutionary place in pre-flood Mesozoic and Paleozoic strata, and some artifacts have questionable documentation. This is because evolutionists have been negligent. They have chosen to ignore rather than to evaluate the evidence without bias, and some creationists do not have the money or take the time, or they have jumped to biased conclusions. There are a few artifacts that defy explanation. In other words, most of the human artifacts that they say are out of place are not flood deposits. They're post-flood. They're during Peleg's division and during the Tower of Babel period. And that would include Pleistocene, Pliocene, and the Cenozoic. These human artifacts, I discovered, at first I used to think that it was in the middle of the Pliocene through the Pleistocene, or maybe just the Pleistocene was post-flood. Now I found I was wrong. All of the Cenozoic, as researching this book, has been proven to be post-flood, which is an amazing thing to me. I will continue this in next article. We're ending on page 105.